These 6 individuals made decisions that led to tragic encounters. From hidden thermal dangers to wildlife encounters gone wrong, these are the stories of visitors whose final moments in America's first national park became cautionary. It was August 14, 2016, in Yellowstone National Park's Norris Geyser Basin. The afternoon temperature hovered near 89 degrees Fahrenheit, and heat radiated off the pale mineral ground as steam drifted steadily from vents and pools scattered across the basin. The air carried a constant hiss, water boiling beneath a fragile surface. Ethan Cole, 23, had come to Yellowstone with 2 close friends, Ryan and Mitchell, as part of a summer road trip that had already taken them through several western parks. None of them had visited Yellowstone before. The stop at Norris was unplanned, added after seeing photos online of the basin's surreal colors and rising steam. The 3 moved along the boardwalk with dozens of other visitors, pausing often to take photos and short videos. They joked about the smell, the heat, and how unreal the landscape looked up close. Ryan filmed short clips on his phone while Mitchell lingered behind, reading warning signs posted along the walkway. Norris Geyser Basin is one of the park's most active thermal areas. Beneath the thin crust lies scalding water and unstable ground that can collapse without warning. Rangers emphasize that the solid-looking surface beyond the boardwalk is often no stronger than a shell. As the group reached a wider viewing area near Steamboat Geyser, Ethan stepped ahead to frame a photo that would capture all 3 of them with steam rising behind. He backed up slowly, glancing between the phone screen and his friends, trying to fit everyone into the shot. From where they stood, the ground beside the boardwalk looked dry and firm, coated in white and yellow mineral deposits that resembled solid stone. Ethan took one more step backward, and the surface beneath his heel cracked with a sharp, brittle sound. The mineral crust gave way instantly, collapsing inward as steam surged upward from the opening. Ryan watched as Ethan dropped straight down, chunks of hardened mineral falling after him. His arms flailed once before he vanished below the surface. The scream cut through the basin, short, raw, and abruptly silenced by the roar of escaping steam. Ryan lunged forward on instinct, but another visitor grabbed his shoulder and dragged him back toward the boardwalk as the ground around the opening continued to shift. Mitchell stood frozen several steps away, staring at the spot where Ethan had been moments earlier, unable to move. The pool beneath the collapsed crust churned violently, filled with near-boiling geothermal water. Heat and steam poured out of the opening, and nothing remained visible beneath the surface. Park staff shouted for visitors to clear the area as people backed away in shock. A ranger arrived within minutes and immediately blocked access, warning that the surrounding ground was unstable. Ryan kept pointing toward the opening, repeating that his friend had just been there. Mitchell remained motionless, his phone still recording in his hand, though he didn't seem aware of it. No rescue attempt was possible. The temperature of the water and the instability of the surrounding ground made entry fatal. Park rangers secured the section of the basin and evacuated nearby visitors. Ethan was pronounced dead at the scene based on the conditions of the pool and the nature of the fall. Specialized thermal recovery teams returned days later to assess the area. The water and acidity had destroyed most personal belongings. Ethan's phone was never recovered. An investigation determined that Ethan died from catastrophic thermal burns after stepping off the designated boardwalk onto unstable ground. The incident was ruled an accidental death caused by unsafe proximity to an active thermal feature. The area remained closed for the rest of the day. Ryan and Mitchell were escorted from the basin and later left the park early. Steamboat Geyser resumed its normal activity. Visitors returned to the boardwalk. The warning signs remained unchanged. It was April 17, 2016, in Yellowstone National Park's backcountry near the Lamar River. Overnight temperatures had dropped below freezing, preserving patches of late-season snow across shaded sections of trail, while daytime warming softened the surface layer. The landscape appeared calm, with shallow snowfields stretching across low areas where streams flowed beneath. Michael Rourke, 41, had entered the park from the north entrance that morning for a solo day hike along a lightly traveled backcountry route. The trip marked his first major outing since the end of a long-term relationship that had quietly unraveled earlier that year. After months of shared routines and plans that no longer existed, Michael chose Yellowstone for its isolation, far from familiar places and conversations he wasn't ready to revisit. He was not a frequent backcountry hiker. While he had spent years enjoying national parks during vacations, this was his first solo trip of this scale. He planned a conservative route along the Lamar River corridor, intending to walk several miles, photograph wildlife tracks left in the remaining snow, and return before nightfall. The hike was meant to be manageable, structured, and solitary. Spring conditions in Yellowstone can be deceptive. Snow that appears firm from above can conceal fast-moving water below, especially near riverbanks where meltwater undercuts the snowpack. Rangers routinely warn that snow bridges, formed when snow spans flowing water, can collapse suddenly as temperatures rise. Michael followed the trail without incident through open terrain, where snow coverage was thin and broken. Near the river, however, wide stretches of white extended uninterrupted from bank to bank, giving the appearance of solid ground. The sound of running water was faint, dampened beneath layers of snow and ice. As he approached a bend in the river, Michael stepped off the packed trail briefly to examine tracks near the shoreline. From his position, the snowfield ahead appeared level and continuous, blending seamlessly with the surrounding terrain. There were no visible breaks, sagging, or discoloration to indicate instability. As Michael stepped onto the snowfield, his weight transferred onto what was, in reality, a thin snow bridge suspended over the Lamar River. The structure failed instantly. The snow collapsed beneath him, dropping him several feet into the river below. Cold water surged around him as broken slabs of snow fell in after him, briefly trapping him beneath the surface. The shock of the icy water stole his breath. The cold, fast-moving river pulled him downstream while he struggled to orient himself. Heavy clothing absorbed water, increasing drag and making it difficult to fight the flow. Michael resurfaced briefly, but was unable to reach the collapsing edges of the snow bridge. The river carried him into a narrow channel bordered by ice and debris, where submerged rocks disrupted the current and forced him under again. Within minutes, exhaustion set in. The cold rapidly reduced his strength and coordination, limiting his ability to swim or keep his airway clear. The river continued downstream, carrying him out of sight beneath the remaining snow cover. The area was remote, and the collapse left little visible disturbance beyond a jagged opening in the snow where the bridge had failed. When Michael failed to return that evening, park authorities initiated a search based on his planned route. Rangers discovered the collapsed snow bridge the following day and traced signs of disturbance along the riverbank downstream. Michael's body was recovered later that afternoon, several hundred yards from the collapse site. An investigation determined that he died from drowning, with cold water immersion and river current identified as contributing factors. There was no evidence of equipment failure or wildlife involvement. Officials concluded that the accident was caused by the collapse of a concealed snow bridge over moving water, a known spring hazard in Yellowstone's river corridors. The case was closed as an accidental death resulting from environmental conditions common during seasonal thaw. It was June 3, 2014, in Yellowstone National Park's Lamar Valley. The morning temperature hovered around 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and the broad grassland stretched open beneath clear skies. Several vehicles were pulled off along the road as visitors watched bison grazing across the valley floor. Lamar Valley is one of Yellowstone's most active wildlife corridors. Bison move freely through the area, often crossing roads and feeding near popular viewing spots. Despite their slow appearance, the animals are unpredictable and responsible for more visitor injuries in Yellowstone than any other species. Park regulations require people to remain at least 25 yards away from bison at all times. Jennifer Rodriguez, 26, entered the valley alone with a camera and mobile streaming setup. She had planned the stop as part of a longer road trip through the park, hoping to capture close wildlife footage. She parked near a pullout and began filming a large bull bison grazing in the open field below. From a distance, the animal appeared calm. Its head remained down as it fed, occasionally lifting to scan the area before returning to the grass. Other visitors stayed closer to the road, using zoom lenses to observe. Jennifer, however, stepped off the roadside and moved into the grassland for a clearer view. The open terrain made distance difficult to judge. Without trees, fences, or elevation changes, the gap between her and the animal appeared manageable. She paused several times to continue filming, narrating what she saw as the bull continued grazing without reacting. Bison often give little obvious warning before reacting. Signs of agitation can be brief and subtle, easily missed by untrained observers. Rangers regularly caution that calm behavior does not indicate safety, especially when a person continues to close distance. Jennifer continued forward in short steps, stopping between movements to adjust her camera. By this point, she was well inside the park's minimum safety distance, though nothing in the environment signaled the danger clearly. The bull bison lifted its head and turned its body slightly in her direction. The movement lasted only a moment. Its posture shifted, weight settling forward as its attention fixed on her position. The charge began without warning. The animal surged forward across the open ground, covering the short distance faster than any human could react. Jennifer attempted to turn away, but the gap was already gone. The impact knocked her off her feet, and the bison continued forward, striking her as it passed. Witnesses later described the force of the collision as immediate and overwhelming. The animal's hooves struck repeatedly as Jennifer fell to the ground, unable to regain her footing. The attack lasted only seconds before the bull moved on and rejoined the herd, leaving her motionless in the grass. Nearby visitors shouted and began calling emergency services as the bison walked away. No further aggression occurred. The area fell quiet again, broken only by movement from other animals in the valley. Park rangers and medical responders were dispatched to the scene. Due to the location within Lamar Valley, access required time. When responders reached Jennifer, she had sustained catastrophic blunt force injuries consistent with trampling. She was pronounced dead at the scene. An investigation determined that the bison acted defensively and that the attack was triggered by close human proximity. No evidence of provocation beyond the approach itself was found. Rangers noted that the incident matched a pattern seen in previous bison-related injuries and fatalities in Yellowstone. Following the death, park officials reiterated safety guidelines and emphasized that distance is the most critical factor when observing wildlife. Lamar Valley remained open, but ranger patrols were increased during peak viewing hours. The case was officially closed as an accidental death caused by unsafe proximity to a wild animal, one of the most preventable yet recurring fatal scenarios in Yellowstone National Park. It was September 19, 2015, at Shoshone Lake in Yellowstone National Park. The morning air was cool, hovering around 54 degrees Fahrenheit, as mist drifted low over the surface of the lake. Surrounded by forest and far from paved roads, Shoshone Lake is one of the largest backcountry lakes in the park and among the most isolated. Robert Stones, 29, had entered the backcountry 2 days earlier on a permitted solo hiking and camping trip. An experienced hiker and amateur photographer, he planned to document Yellowstone's remote wilderness areas before continuing deeper into the park. His route included an overnight camp near Shoshone Lake, a location known for sudden weather changes and strong winds that can build quickly across open water. Although motorized boats are restricted, non-motorized watercraft such as canoes and pack rafts are permitted on Shoshone Lake with proper authorization. Rangers regularly warn backcountry users that the lake's size and exposure make it deceptively dangerous, especially for solo travelers. Cold water temperatures persist even in early fall, and rescue response times are often measured in hours. On the morning of September 19th, Robert prepared to cross a wide section of the lake to reach a photographic viewpoint on the opposite shoreline. He loaded his gear, camera equipment, camping supplies, and food. into a lightweight canoe he had carried in sections along the trail. The lake appeared calm, with only light ripples visible near the shore. With no other campers nearby and no immediate signs of changing weather, Robert pushed off alone, angling toward the far side of the lake. Less than 15 minutes into the crossing, conditions began to change. A steady wind swept down the length of the lake, building low waves that struck the canoe broadside. The open water offered little protection, and each gust increased the instability of the lightweight craft. Robert attempted to adjust his course, paddling harder to maintain balance while keeping his gear steady. The added weight of his equipment raised the canoe's center of gravity, making it slower to respond to corrective movements. As the wind strengthened, waves began splashing over the side. The canoe rocked sharply after a sudden gust caught it at an angle. Water poured in faster than Robert could react. Within seconds, the canoe capsized, throwing him into the lake. The cold shock was immediate. Shoshone Lake's water temperature remained low despite the mild air, and the sudden immersion robbed him of breath and coordination. His heavy clothing and backpack absorbed water, pulling him downward as he struggled to orient himself. The canoe drifted away in the wind, out of reach. Without a life jacket and weighed down by gear, Robert attempted to swim toward the overturned craft, but quickly lost strength. Witnesses were absent, and the vast shoreline offered no immediate reference point. After several minutes of frantic movement, he slipped beneath the surface. The lake returned to calm as the wind continued pushing the empty canoe across the open water. When Robert failed to check in at a designated ranger station later that day, a search was initiated based on his filed itinerary. Rangers reached Shoshone Lake hours later and located the drifting canoe along the shoreline, partially submerged and still loaded with equipment. Search teams recovered Robert's body the following day, in deeper water near the center of the lake. An examination determined that he died from drowning, with cold water immersion and exhaustion contributing to his inability to self-rescue. Park officials noted that Shoshone Lake drownings, while rare, follow a consistent pattern involving sudden wind, cold water, and the absence of flotation devices. Rangers reiterated that even experienced hikers and paddlers are vulnerable in Yellowstone's backcountry lakes. The case was officially closed as an accidental drowning caused by environmental conditions and solo exposure. Another example of how Yellowstone's most remote locations leave no margin for error. It was May 8, 2017, at Artist Point in Yellowstone National Park. The evening air sat at a mild 68 degrees Fahrenheit as visitors gathered along the canyon overlook, waiting for the light to soften over the lower falls. Cameras and phones lined the stone railings as families took turns capturing photos at one of the park's most photographed viewpoints. Patricia Johnson, 43, had brought her family to Yellowstone for a spring vacation. Traveling with her husband and 3 teenage children, she had planned the trip carefully, marking scenic stops and timing visits around lighting conditions she had researched in advance. Like many visitors, she wanted photos that captured both the scale of the canyon and the memory of being there together. Artist Point is designed for heavy foot traffic, with defined walkways, stone barriers, and railings intended to keep visitors at a safe distance from the canyon edge. Despite these protections, park rangers routinely warn that accidents still occur when visitors step beyond designated areas for a better view or photo angle. As the family took turns posing near the overlook, Patricia adjusted positions repeatedly, trying to frame the canyon and waterfall behind them. Other visitors nearby waited patiently, watching the scene unfold as she repositioned herself several times to widen the shot. Her children stood near the railing while she moved backward, focusing on her camera screen rather than the terrain beneath her feet. Park officials later noted that many fatal overlook accidents follow a similar pattern, beginning with visitors stepping beyond designated viewing areas while focused on photography. As Patricia stepped backward to adjust her framing, she moved past the established viewing area and onto uneven ground beside the overlook. The surface sloped subtly toward the canyon, with loose gravel scattered across exposed rock. Focused on aligning the shot, she did not stop to reassess her footing. Her heel slipped. Witnesses later reported that the movement was sudden and silent. There was no shout, no time for someone to grab her arm. She lost balance and tipped backward, sliding across the rock before disappearing over the canyon edge. Her family watched in shock as she fell out of sight. The canyon below is steep and irregular, with jagged ledges and cliffs that drop hundreds of feet toward the river. The fall was not a single vertical drop, but a violent tumble down the canyon face. Other visitors rushed toward the railing as her husband called emergency services, trying to shield their children from the view below. Park rangers were notified immediately, but the terrain made any immediate rescue impossible. Search and rescue teams responded to the scene, securing the overlook and beginning a coordinated recovery effort. Due to fading light in the hazardous canyon walls, operations were suspended overnight. Patricia's body was recovered the following morning by specialized rescue personnel. Investigators determined that she died from injuries sustained during the fall. The incident was ruled an accidental death. Park officials later reiterated safety guidance for visitors at canyon overlooks, emphasizing that railings and designated viewing areas are the only safe places to stand. Even a single step beyond protected zones can place someone on unstable ground, with no margin for recovery. Artist Point reopened after the investigation concluded. Visitors continued to line the overlook, cameras raised toward the falls. Another reminder that some of Yellowstone's most beautiful locations are also among its most unforgiving. It was July 22, 2013, in Yellowstone National Park's Upper Geyser Basin. The afternoon temperature reached 94 degrees Fahrenheit, as heat shimmered above the boardwalks and steam drifted continuously from nearby thermal features. Summer conditions amplified the effects of geothermal activity, creating dense pockets of vapor in low-lying areas beneath elevated walkways. Thomas Walsh, 38, was working a scheduled maintenance shift inspecting boardwalk supports near one of the park's heavily visited thermal basins. A long-time maintenance employee, he had spent over a decade working in Yellowstone's geothermal zones, performing routine inspections and repairs designed to keep visitors safely separated from unstable ground and hazardous runoff. Maintenance in thermal areas requires close proximity to vents, channels, and steam-emitting fractures hidden beneath boardwalks. Park safety briefings regularly note that gas concentrations can fluctuate rapidly, depending on wind, temperature, and geothermal pressure. Hydrogen sulfide and other gases are typically dispersed in open air, but can accumulate in confined or sheltered spaces. That afternoon, Thomas was assigned to check structural supports beneath a raised section of boardwalk where mineral buildup had been reported. The task required brief access below the walkway, an area partially enclosed by surrounding terrain and shielded from prevailing winds. Similar inspections had been completed many times before, without incident. Park incident records later noted that many serious maintenance accidents in thermal zones occur during routine tasks in familiar locations, where changing environmental conditions can alter risk without visible warning. Thomas accessed the underside of the boardwalk through a service opening and began examining the support beams and fasteners. Steam vented intermittently from nearby cracks in the ground, drifting beneath the structure before dispersing. At first, conditions appeared manageable. As the afternoon heat intensified, geothermal activity beneath the boardwalk increased. Steam output grew heavier, and gases that normally dissipated into open air became trapped beneath the walkway. Without strong airflow, concentrations built rapidly in the confined space. Within minutes, Thomas was exposed to a surge of hydrogen sulfide and superheated steam. The gas is colorless and can overwhelm the senses without warning, causing sudden dizziness and loss of muscle control. He attempted to retreat toward the access point, but collapsed before reaching open air. His radio transmitted a brief distress call before falling silent. Nearby staff members responded immediately, but approaching the area was dangerous due to continued gas emissions beneath the boardwalk. Rangers secured the surrounding area and initiated emergency protocols. When responders reached Thomas, he was unresponsive. Despite rapid evacuation from the exposure zone and emergency medical efforts, he could not be revived. An investigation determined that Thomas died from acute exposure to toxic geothermal gases, with hydrogen sulfide identified as the primary contributing factor. Officials noted that gas concentrations can spike suddenly in confined thermal spaces, even in areas that are routinely accessed for maintenance. The incident led to a review of safety procedures for boardwalk inspections, particularly those requiring access beneath elevated structures. Additional monitoring and ventilation protocols were emphasized for maintenance crews working in geothermal zones during extreme heat. The boardwalk reopened after inspections were completed and safety measures reviewed. Thomas's death was ruled an on-duty accidental fatality caused by hazardous environmental exposure. The investigation was closed after safety reviews were completed, and maintenance operations resumed under updated exposure monitoring guidelines. Thanks for watching. Click the next video to see more videos like this.